Flaws make our characters relatable, memorable, and complex. So let's jump right into our top 10 writing tips to help you write character flaws that will enhance your writing.
Our first tip is to make flaws relatable to your reader. So think about this. If your character has a flaw that your reader can relate with, maybe it's something like anxiety or self-doubt, or, self-deprecation, something like that, then your reader may struggle with the same thing. And if you can get that connection between the character and the reader with a flaw, doesn't always have to be a big flaw, sometimes just a little one, it makes the character more interesting to the reader and they connect, which makes them really care about the character.
Some common human flaws that a lot of people can relate to are things like procrastination, forgetfulness, anxiety, stubbornness, a tendency to not be able to say no. Who can't relate to that? Most people can. Well, not most people, but some people can. Those are really common flaws that people struggle with.
You could also look at something like the 7 deadly sins to find flaws that are common to everyone. Now, the 7 deadly sins are things like pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, and sloth. Which flaws do you relate with, and maybe which ones do you use in your writing? We would love to hear in the comments.
Number 2 is show the impact of these flaws on your character's life. How do these flaws impact their relationships, their goals, their ambitions? Those flaws should have an impact on their life.
Or the inability to say no could lead to a situation that your character doesn't really want to be in, and then have to figure out how do they navigate out of this situation that they never wanted to be in the first place. Now let's talk about real life. You and I have obviously done that. We have not said no when we should have. We've got ourselves in a situation. So what I'm saying is that it makes it relatable to real life, and that's where the connection between the reader and the character really comes to life.
So make sure your character flaw impacts the story as well as the character.
Writing tip number 3 is to balance flaws with strengths. A well-rounded character is going to have both flaws and strengths, and that's important. Sometimes if we only focus on one or the other, it can lead to a character that's out of balance, and something is wrong with that. The reader will pick up on that. So if your character has a flaw of maybe they're very forgetful, they should have a strength, something like maybe being very resourceful or creative. That offsets that flaw and gives them something to balance it out with. That makes the character way more interesting, gives them depth of character, and your audience is going to relate with that way, way better.
If your character has no redeeming qualities, then the reader has no reason to care.
Hey, I do have some redeeming qualities.
You do have redeeming qualities.
Okay.
And so should your characters in your story. An example of this would be perhaps your character is super shy, like painfully shy. But maybe on the flip
not me.
maybe on the flip side of that, they're also really quite brilliant and they notice things that other people don't notice, and that is a strength, and that will endear them to your readers.
Yeah, remember the key here is balance. Keep your flaws and your strengths in balance. You got to have both.
And number 4 is use flaws as a catalyst for growth and change. Characters should evolve throughout the story. The flaws should lead to challenges that push the character into change.
This change could be a positive change, as in a positive character arc, or it could be a negative for a negative character arc. There has to be some change for that overall character arc to be in place. And remember, that can be one big thing, but also put little things in there as well, because then you have a progressive character arc that is going to keep people interested.
Character arc is an essential part of a satisfying story. So your flaws should enhance the character arc. So ask the question, what can my character learn from this flaw? Now, if you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe for more videos with great writing tips.
Number 5 is avoid stereotypes. Your flaws need to be unique to your character. And if it's just a stereotype or a cliche, it's not really going to work well. So think your whole flaw structure through very carefully and connect it with the backstory of your character. So if you have a particular flaw in mind, then go back and look at the backstory and make sure the backstory supports that particular flaw. And you can approach this from either direction. You can look at their backstory and find the flaw, or you can have a particular flaw in mind and then go back and make sure that there is something in the backstory that supports that. And maybe you have to add to the character's backstory or sprinkle that in throughout the existing piece that you've written. But it should be connected with the backstory so there is a meaning or a reason for that character's flaws. That'll make your character way more believable.
And number 6 is make sure the flaws have consequences. So when a character makes a choice based on the flaw, that should lead to an outcome. And that outcome should add depth to the story by showing the reader that the flaws can lead to either growth or not growth, a bad thing. Those flaws can do both. Now, you can use these consequences, find those consequences, and that can add depth to your story.
The 7th writing tip we have for you is to make sure that your flaws lead to conflict. Flaws obviously create conflict relationally, but in every other way. Sometimes my flaws can rub her wrong, and then we have a conflict. It's the same with your character. You need to have the flaws create misunderstandings, conflict with other characters, internal struggles, things that they have to overcome. And the more that struggle happens due to a natural flaw, the more natural the book seems and the character arc seems. And your readers are going to like that a whole lot more because it's relatable and it drives character depth, things that they can connect with. And, your character's got to have some flaws. They got to have some conflict because conflict drives story.
This is a great place to ask the question, what if? What if the character refuses to ask for help in a really crazy situation where they should because their weakness is pride?
What are you insinuating?
Well, sometimes that's a problem. But or what about this one? What if your character lashes out and says something really mean to another character that they really need help from because they have anger management problems?
That's not me. Maybe that's...
That's the what if. What if? Ask that question. And number 8 is flaws can be subtle. Not all character flaws are flashy and obvious. Sometimes they're very quiet. And that can make the motivation of the character a little unclear, which can keep the reader engaged because they're not really sure what's happening here. What's the flaw? What's this character struggling with because it's not obvious. So keep in mind that character flaws can be very subtle.
Number 9 is to reflect real human experience. Look, here's the deal. Your character should have real flaws that are relatable, just like we have flaws. I have flaws, you have flaws. She is the epitome of perfection, and the flaws that she has is very subtle. But that's how characters are. That's how people are, and that's how your character needs to be. That needs to be relatable to real-life experience.
This is why a character in a book or movie with no flaws is boring. The characters that are memorable are those that best reflect the human experience, with flaws and weaknesses and good and bad and highs and lows. That's what's relatable.
Just remember that authenticity will resonate with your reader. The more authentic you make your character, the better off you are.
And number 10 is embrace imperfections. Remember that no one is perfect, and so find those imperfections in your character. That is what readers are going to relate to, is those imperfections.
So what you're saying is that a perfect character should have imperfections.
Yes.
So if you like this video, if it was beneficial to you, you're going to love this one that's popping up on the screen right now.
And we would love to hear from you in the comments. What character flaws do you relate to? We will catch you in the next video.